With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Hey, podcast listeners, SJ here. Just a quick message to you, just to bring you up to date on a couple of things that are going on around Zoweh and in my own personal life. And as you've heard me share on the podcast multiple times, God has me on a journey of vulnerability, and so I'm going to try to be as vulnerable as I can as I share this. So in February, it was a very tough month for me. I am, as you may know, I'm a retired firefighter, and not one but two of my close friends from when I was active in the fire department passed away in February. And then when Sherry and I were on vacation in the early part of February, I got a notification that my mom had taken a fall. And she was already having some health issues. And that fall began a fairly rapid decline, which ultimately led to her death on February 21st. So as you can imagine, it's been a month full of a range of emotions, working through the deaths of two friends and then having my mom pass away, who, by the way, lived a very full life. She knew Jesus, so I know where she is. She was 88 years old at the end of January, so she lived a very full and loving and laughter-filled life. And so there's a rejoicing that she has entered into the glory of God, entered into the presence of Jesus. And there's still grief that is going on and being processed by me and by my family. And so I appreciate your understanding. I appreciate your patience in giving me a little bit of margin before we get back into the studio and record some new episodes. But I thought it was appropriate, given all that God is leading me through at this time, that we maybe go back and revisit a two-part series that Michael, Greg, and I recorded back in 2020 about grief, loss, and thankfulness. And so I hope you enjoy these episodes and get as much out of them as I have in re-listening to them in the midst of all of the grief that I'm trying to process and work through. And we will be back in the studio soon. And thank you again for your patience, understanding, and prayers. If you have questions or comments or messages that you'd like to send us, our email address, as always, is exploringmore@zoweh.org. And we'll be back in the studio soon. Thank you.
I am Michael Thompson.
Yeah.
And I'm hanging out with my friends S.J. Jennings, who I think it's time to say as usual, hanging out with my friend S.J. Jennings.
We could almost say as usual. I'm going to say as usual. You've said it a few times now.
Yeah. And another cohort you've become accustomed to listening to, Greg Sailors, who's also on the Zoweh team and is an explorer in his own right. And
Good to be here.
Just exploring thankfulness and the significance of that in the kingdom, in a believer's heart and journey. I know we're going to talk about our experience with COVID, how that virus came and
infiltrated.
Good word.
Yeah,
through
excellent
our
word.
team, and we got sick. We got pretty sick. So,
yeah.
But I think we can back up into 2020 a little more.
Yep.
This was a year of loss for many. I would say for everyone, including us and our mission and ministry and things that seem to be very common for people around the world. I mean, there's a lot of loss. And while we didn't suffer ultimately the death of someone, we suffered the death of a lot of things.
Yeah,
True.
It's a tough year to be thankful. Dr. Jeremiah has a great quote here. He says, no matter what our circumstances, we can find a reason to be thankful.
Yeah.
We've kind of been living in that zone this year.
Right.
And finding a reason to be thankful.
You have to choose Thanksgiving a lot in 2020.
Yeah.
If that's your first reaction or response, I would say, wow, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Or how are you doing that?
Yeah.
Maybe what's really, really right with you. But I found that to be true in my life. It takes me a little while to get there. Sometimes,
Process.
as you grieve loss and death, you can journey to that place where that is so, so true, Greg.
Right. I think about Paul saying to be content in all things. That's not necessarily Thanksgiving. It is the root, rather.
Yeah, more to the point of what you're saying, Michael. I, myself, and others that I know have struggled some with, I don't want to experience the pain. I don't want to experience the grief or the loss. So I'm moving on and trot out these scriptures
That's one way people go.
Excuses to not go into the pain associated with the loss you experienced.
Yeah.
I've done that.
It's a great way to cut off your heart. It's a great way to cut off feeling. And it's a great way to disrespect what is God offering you in this situation and in this fallen place.
Yeah.
We're promised trials. We're promised the struggles. But it's in those very challenges and struggles and trials that God says there's something good that can come from this. There's a process that James writes about it. Consider it pure joy when you encounter trials of various kinds, knowing that it's the testing of your faith that produces. And then he goes on. And so there's something that God's after in 2020 in all of our lives,
right?
In some way, shape, or form, that as we have been inconvenienced, if not far, far, far worse, hit. I've described it, with you guys around the table. I mean, we've been punched in the face. We've been kicked in the gut with some of the things that have happened in 2020. Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about what a few months afterwards, how much clarity we have gotten.
Oh, yeah.
About
looking back,
what that was when initially it was taken from us. Conferences, for example, 3 major and a couple strategic conferences taken off of the calendar because you
couldn't. And also literally 50 small groups that had to be canceled in churches and things that were starting.
Anything that had to do with gathering.
Right.
And
off the table.
Bowling alleys, theaters. I mean, this is restaurants, anything. And that's us. We love to create environments for people to connect with God and each other. And that was thwarted in some ways. And yet, as we turned to, if we can't do that, then what can we do to continue to offer more love, more life, and more freedom?
Yeah.
What can we do to encourage people on their journey with God and that orientation that we try to offer everywhere we go?
Right.
So we turn to audio and video. We turn to email and Zooming. You said this the other day. It was so funny. I hate Zoom. And I love Zoom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because I'm a personal
relationship.
I'm a personal connection guy, so I love to be with people. But Zoom has been such a blessing for the kingdom. It was the Roman road, if you will, during COVID, particularly the first part.
Yeah. Being able to still see people, get some facial expressions.
Yeah.
Because dadgum, these masks, it's a challenge. It's still a challenge.
Well, it's very much a challenge.
I loved what Gary Barklow, though, said at Heart of Warrior West.
Last week, the one event we got to have was West, a small event. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we were talking about the masks that are on our face there, trying to be responsible, of course. And he just made a sagely statement, as you've heard us many times say before with Gary, which is you might have masks on your faces, but you don't have masks on your heart.
Yeah.
But, I would say maybe some do. And that was one of the things we were trying to accomplish at West.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the 3 events, earlier in the year. I mean, how did the loss of that land on, our team, would you say, Michael? And then we can talk about how that felt as individuals.
And when and how we became thankful. What did that do?
How does that wrap in?
Because I've got some thankfulness for the fruit of the weekends canceled wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And what it was and what it became was really, really good.
Yeah.
It just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So we've been doing this for a decade. And what's the commercial? We've learned a thing or two because
we know a thing or two because we've seen
a thing or two.
Yeah.
And
sponsored by.
And I would go back to that. It's part of our missional identity that we love to create environments and resources. Now, we've added that this year. We love to create environments and resources for people to connect with the heart of God and with one another. And so for me, I understood the first one. I would say that kind of like a hurricane came through and we lost some windows. There's some damage.
Right. That was our January Allies event.
Yes.
We had 150 plus guys signed up.
Yeah,
for.
And it was brand new. I mean, it was built on our old advance, and then it has that Allies element.
That was March.
I thought.
It was March. It's January this coming year for alums that are listening. Zoweh.org/events.
But alumni, it's such a reunion. It's so good. The kind of 2.0 junior, senior journey, and just a deeper dive into masculine journey, and in particular, the glory of your life. How do you reflect God's image uniquely? And what is that role for you to play on the world stage in the love story, in the great battle, in the midst of the great love story? So, it's not one that we do every year. And so it was pretty exciting and a lot of registrations.
And we'd moved to Goshen. We had been in Lynchburg. And so it was
all of those things.
So much.
Young Life made that call, the Young Life Camp. And I think in making that, this is March, right? In the beginning of what's coming down on everyone. I remember sitting there within 24 hours before going, okay, Jesus, what's the most responsible thing I need to do here for our team and for these 150? Because you know what I want to do, Greg. Let's go forward.
Damn the torpedoes.
We're not letting fear rule us.
We're God's team, and some of that stuff that can just overestimate, maybe what God's doing. Yeah, like with every battle, God, how do you want us to do this? How does this go? And we have our go-to things, but we're also very, very open. But I got the call from Rockbridge and Young Life Camp, and they had said, in response to the COVID concerns, the responsibility that they took was, we're going to cancel. And I think they pushed it off till June.
Or 3 months or whatever it was. But it took the weight of making the decision.
Off of me.
Off of you.
But as a matter of fact, they pushed it just to the end of April. So we had another conference that was contracted with them. So I'm going to jump, SJ, real quick to the thankfulness part.
Yeah.
So what happened is we had 150 alumni who were coming and registered. So we're looking at our finances, our budget, and we just asked the question, hey, here's 3 options. You can donate your registration, we can refund the whole thing, or we can do something in the middle, something in between. And I was so thankful for how many men, most all, and not everybody could, right?
Sure.
But most all donated.
I think it was
their registration.
It was north of 75 or 80%.
Which SJ and Greg, you know that if they donated their registration and we didn't have the expense of the conference,
it was a windfall for us.
It was a 300% increase.
It was an injection of capital for us.
In our little margin, you know.
Gave us some runway.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And we didn't know what was coming at the time financially either.
It's early.
So that was such a blessing.
Yep. Through that trial and through really that disappointment, God funded us several more months.
Yep.
And just, you can't make that up. Who would have known? Who would have known how that played out? But on another, personally, and I'll ask you guys, it still had some heartache for me because of where we are in the larger mission of Zoweh. I mean, we were cutting keys. We were knighting guys, men. We were passing out what's been given to us in the kingdom, which is power and authority and influence. I think we were giving men another accommodation, if you will, in their rank as they're moving forward in their identity, in their freedom, in their ability to walk as what we call men who are dangerous for good. And to know that that had to be put in the garage, it felt like we were left on the tarmac. That's what it felt like, that we were ready to go.
So think about Band of Brothers, a series we've referenced over and over again. And the day before, they go through all this training, right? And then the day before they're supposed to launch D-Day, postponed because of weather. Postponed because of weather. and they're sitting. They're literally sitting on the tarmac.
All dressed up.
That was us, listeners. I mean, we had our parachute on, we had our reserve chute, we had our musette bags, we had our ammo, we had our rifles, and it was like, somebody help me stand up because we got to go back to the barracks.
Jump today.
So a real life example for me, a little painful to call up, but I feel God bringing it up. Many, many years ago, I was dating a lady. I'll let her name remain anonymous. And I created this amazing meal for us. I was about 20, 18, somewhere. I don't know where.
It's all fuzzy.
Yeah, it's fuzzy. But I created this awesome meal outside. You guys that know me know I love to cook and create those types of hospitality environments. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I did candlelight, lights around, all that mess. The white lasagna I love to make. It was phenomenal. And I get a call from her best friend that says she's not coming.
Mm.
And so, no explanation, a few weeks of not hearing from her at all about why and all that. And, it's another story. But that's a good example of the way I felt about losing Allies Advance because, 2019 was such an integral year for Zoweh Allies and all that we were doing there.
Heart of a Warrior was moving.
It was moving.
As a book and as a resource for men to gather around.
Yeah, and so between 2019 and the spring of 2020, there were probably 120 to 150 new groups that started.
Right.
And so it felt like a celebration and a validation of all the hard work that our team had done, and it got taken away. So it was really hard on my heart.
And to that point, Greg, there was a momentum that had been building, and there were going to be guys there that hadn't started groups yet.
Right.
And they were going to get in on the snowball that was running downhill
so that's
whatever.
A great point. So one of the things we love to do with starting groups is we have a few different dates on the calendar that are super important, one of which is coming up soon, which is Christmas. And we encourage churches, particularly because they're on semester system, to buy books, give them to their men for Christmas, come to an event, let our Allies team train your team, and then launch into the larger members of your church. We do the same thing with Father's Day, and you guys have heard us talk about it here before on the podcast. And so we had those dates, and we had people in that system, that we had worked out for them to come to Advance and or to come to Encounter. And so, when all of these different stories of men that have all these hopes, and then it's taken away, I feel it deeply.
Yeah.
And so did they.
Yeah, we're going to take a break, so we'll be right back. Hey listeners, SJ here. Just want to clue you in on some of our upcoming events for 2022 and remind you that the purpose of Zoweh events is to create a safe space where men, women, and couples can encounter God, experience Him in wonderfully intimate ways, and enter into life-changing transformation. Our men's weekend, the Heart of a Warrior Encounter, is coming up April 28th through May 1st, 2022 at Rockbridge. We'll be back in the hills of Virginia for the first time in a couple of years. And then our women's weekend, the Deepening Weekend, is May 19th through the 22nd of 2022. And we'll be actually at Sharp Top Cove in Jasper, Georgia. And it is a beautiful, beautiful facility. So we encourage you to go to zoweh.org/events for more information. Again, the men's weekend is April 28th through May 1st, and the women's weekend is May 19th through the 22nd of 2022. Hope to see you guys there.
All right, welcome back. Hope you'll take advantage of what we're trying to do. I wish we could give Heart of a Warrior away, just give them away. But I'm excited about this deal and that we've done with Amazon and the opportunity to try to make the book as affordable as possible. And I love where this conversation is going because momentum. You said the word momentum.
Yeah.
And COVID in 2020, it stunted momentum for everybody.
Yeah, and you try to recover.
We know marriages, we know weddings. That were postponed.
Sure.
We know events. I mean, I think
graduations,
of all the seniors.
Yeah.
And
what a
basketball,
year.
Different sports in college.
As it dragged on, right? And April was taken, and May, June. It just
endless.
And somewhere in there, I think about Shawshank when Red tells his cellmates, his posse, about being institutionalized.
Yeah. Brooks got paroled.
and then he committed suicide.
Yeah.
And he's describing the effect of these walls. You know, you can take the man out of prison, but basically saying prison stays in the man and you are institutionalized. And we've seen that with COVID. There's disparity even. We're not all on the same page with masks, and, you know, some are more rebellious. Others are far, far, far in the conservative space. And
even in our experience, I talked to a guy last week. He told me that this has been the best year of his life.
Right.
I mean,
that's right.
Oh, hey, do we have a helicopter going over?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yeah,
we're about to have an Apache.
Yeah,
or
we're right near the Marine Corps Air Station down here.
You hear it?
This is really cool,
Thompson.
actually.
So check out the sound of freedom, folks, for a second.
Here it comes.
Yeah. I won't.
It's still 1,000 miles away. No, it's not that far.
And we had SJ and I had Blackhawks last night, which was really neat.
God bless
It's out there, still close.
men and women in the armed forces. Thank you for your service.
We just had Veterans Day.
We just went through Veterans Day not that long ago.
Tell the story. You know, we're in a circle with some men. I was in that circle, and our friend Rob said, this has been the best several months of my life.
Yeah.
And we all kind of craned our neck like, what?
Right. But do you remember why?
Tell us.
Well, with the helicopter in the back.
He got a helicopter ride.
That's right. It sounds like a drum roll now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rob was just sharing that it made him slow down.
Forced him to.
It forced him. He was out of work. And again, that's loss. But he's thankful for some of these events and circumstances, because in his story, he's living to tell that this brought him closer to Jesus.
Yep.
And Jesus closer to him.
Yeah.
It's a great story about what we're talking about.
No
and
doubt.
just before him, another friend of ours said, this has been the worst several months of my life.
Right.
And so hard. So it was an incredible contrast.
It's a dichotomy.
Yeah. And what I want to say too about that, Michael, is Rob and the other fella, they're on the same timeline and on the same journey. They're just at different points on it. On the spectrum, right? So
orientation
something we
plays
say,
a big
but
part.
what I mean by that, rather than orientation, although that's very important to be able to see what I'm talking about, what I mean by that is, you know, we're all on this journey of getting to a place of thankfulness. And Rob's there, right? And the other guy isn't yet. But the important thing to remember is something that we say at the weekends and say often. If something awful happens to you, right, that is not God's will, sin is not God's will, although COVID's not a surprise to God, right? But these bad things, these awful things that we have to grieve and experience the loss over, they're not God's will, right? But when things happen to you that are not God's will, he deploys his way.
Right.
And his way is, if you'll journey with him, to bring you to a place of thankfulness.
And stay in this, he'll show you.
That's right.
You know, just for clarity, we believe that there's a sovereign will. So this story is moving in a direction that actually involves sin. And to your point, we teach and share that sin is never God's will. And yet, redemption, restoration, the scriptures are clear. He can make good on anything, any tragedy, any loss.
Romans 8:28 is all things work together for
the
good.
good.
Sure.
So our point, if it's not good yet, he's not done yet.
Right.
That's how redemption works, and that's what restoration is for. I love Eldridge's book. You know, it's
New.
all things new, the restoration of all things.
Yeah.
And so everything that we've lost, everything that's been taken, will one day sovereignly be, can't say replaced,
but
restored, redeemed.
Yeah.
Isn't that so hopeful?
Yes, Greg,
to
yes.
trust, walk, dwell in that hope that all things will become new.
And we have to give each other the room to get there. That is not a good thing to say to somebody whose grandparent just died of COVID.
Right. Yeah. So much
who
incredible
lost their job. I mean, friends, you just got to be careful.
It's not the worst thing you can say.
Almost,
but it's
though. It's almost. Instead of getting in the ditch with them, you're trying to tell them where there's a pretty view somewhere that is just not kind.
You know what I'm going to refer to is Brené Brown's. There's a short clip. You can look it up on YouTube, listeners. Brené Brown, Brene Brown. She talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy is climbing down into the hole and just
being
looking at somebody and saying, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad to be with you.
Right.
You know, in this
that's
hole.
very different than, hey, God's going to turn this into lemonade.
Yeah. So, right after I punch you in the teeth, he will.
I feel worse about how I feel, and now, yes, all that. Go ahead with that video.
Yeah,
that short teaching
check it out.
is really good.
It's really good. It's just a few minutes long, but the
title?
It's just Brené Brown's Sympathy versus Empathy. Yeah,
Gotcha.
And there's even a little.
That's a Sea King rescue helicopter right there.
There's even a cartoon sketching that she does.
Yeah,
video.
it's animated video, and it's pretty entertaining the way she talks about
Funny, not funny kind of thing. Like,
exactly.
because we've all done that.
Oh my gosh.
I've been hopeful guy, sunshine guy.
Right.
Turn that frown upside down guy.
And I've been on the receiving end of it too.
No, I don't practice that anymore.
Mm-hmm. But what I want to suggest too, Michael, as we bring this first part to a close, is that we're talking specifically about 2020 and the grief and loss associated with what everyone has experienced to some degree in this year. But really, as I think more and more about it, it's what we encourage, it's what we espouse, it's what we try to help each other do. We try to, not just the things that are fresh and new that we're going through or grieving, but also the things that are in our history. If you have things in your history and you haven't seen God redeem those things, then there's still work to do. And I heard a pastor one time, Pastor Farrell, he said, the Holy Spirit's a perfect gentleman. And so he certainly could kick down the door of your heart, but he's not going to. That's not how God
often.
works.
He's
not very often. That's right.
Every now and then the rescues are like that.
The rescue swimmer gets deployed, and that.
I love that we're made in His image, so He's a great respecter of His image. I heard somebody say that one time.
That's a great way to think about it. But what I want to encourage our listeners to embark on, now you got more things that you've experienced in 2020 that need to be redeemed. But a large part of what Zoweh is all about is helping people go back in their story and uncover the wounded parts and wounded places in their hearts so that God can take them and make them something new.
Yeah. And we don't just talk about that.
We do it.
It's our experience. That's what's happening to us.
That's right.
That's what we're encountering.
Customers.
And we get to talk about how that works. So as we wrap up, for me, SJ, this has been 6-7 months where we've seen Zoweh has, even if we had had the year that we had with 1,000 people at our conferences, and I mean, the momentum that we talked about, here's what I'm thankful for. Because we turned to audio and video, sent things out via email, Facebook, Amazon, different things, partnering with some other marketing friends, Charisma Magazine, our friends there, to see thousands of people come in and get the survival kits. Thousands of people come in to get the Father's Day kit. To see our database just increase with thousands of new friends and allies, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It could not have happened.
Very encouraging.
I'm so thankful for that.
That's
One
right.
more.
Yeah.
One more. To see thousands more people listening to our podcast.
Right.
To see those numbers go north.
Yeah. They really have.
And to see the trajectory of listening and downloading.
Exploring.
Because people were, slow down. And I believe looking for encouragement, looking for.
They're looking for more
hope, looking for direction. So.
Yeah. I'll add one more to that.
Yeah.
We did our Thursday night Zoom calls where we invited friends to come on Zoom, and we just talked about different things. And all of those are up on YouTube now.
Parenting during COVID.
Parenting,
marriage
COVID. Grief and loss, right? During COVID. I mean, all of that is up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Check it out, listeners. It's all there and it's all free. Just search for Zoweh, Zoweh on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And subscribe. It's very
subscribe.
helpful for us for you to do that.
That's right.
Well, let's land this helicopter.
That's right.
Coming into the helipad.
That's right.
And thank you for listening to part one. I think the title that came to my heart was Grieving, Loss, and Thankfulness.
Question
mark on there? Yeah, because that's what we're talking about in this series.
And that's, next week we're going to talk about our experience with COVID. It got very upfront and personal for all of us. So we'll talk about that next time on the Exploring More podcast.
Thanks for joining us. Explore more the kingdom of God, because there's always more in the kingdom of God. Thanks for being with us. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the life of more by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.